Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the JE webinar, Soft Skills Needed for Engineering and Non-Engineering Eternity. We have our guest presenter today, Dr. Pinnock, online, and a couple other dignitary. And our protocol observed before we actually get into our discussion, we are going to ask Gabriel Scott from the JE student chapter at CMU to lead us in the prayer, asking God's blessings.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let us pray. Most righteous eternal Father, oh God, as we enter into your presence this afternoon, we just want to thank you for this opportunity to be alive, God. So many people did not make it to this hour, but thanks be to God, we are here and we can gather as a group of individuals, oh God, to God, be a part of this seminar. We pray, God, that you will be in our midst. We pray that you touch the speaker's lips, God, and that the information that he will provide to us today, God, will be of, oh God, great knowledge to us, God, and that we will learn something very, oh God, something that is very substantial to our lives, God, and that we can apply it, God, as we move forward throughout our lives, God. We pray that you bless each and every one of us here today, God. We pray that you just continue to be with us, and we pray that, oh God, that you will just, oh God, surround us with your love and with your peace as we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. And thank you so much, Gabriel. Well, those who are just joining, again, welcome. We appreciate you taking special time out your afternoon to be with us today. A webinar that I believe is of importance in today's world, especially with our young engineers coming out of university, young engineers who are practicing in university. And a call was basically made for us to help them, to help themselves. At JIE, that's pretty much the thing that we do. We at JIE try to help in the education, re-education of our engineering experts and young engineers. And as the Vice President of Education and Partnership, I, along with my colleagues, thought it to be of great importance to put, on such a webinar that we can actually have discussion to help to increase knowledge for practitioners and persons who are expected to practice in the field of engineering. Stephen, we have with us our president, Engineer Godfrey Boyd, and at this time, ask President to give us a brief address.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Good evening to each and everyone. To our esteemed presenter, Dr. Pinnock, welcome again. And to the students from the different university chapters, I welcome you. And for all guests, thank you for joining us for this, our second webinar for the Jamaica Institution of Engineers. This year, our theme that we had selected is engineering, the driver of manufacturing, production, economic growth, and health. And this afternoon, you are here to listen to what is needed for the softer skills for engineers. It has often been said that communication is the process of imparting or exchanging information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium. For engineers, it's important to understand that we are not the only ones that exist in the industry. And if we are to lend ourselves in the industries that I had named before, we need to know how to communicate. We need to know how, whether be it in writing or by speech or even our body language, how we communicate. So it's very important, and it's a lot of excitement as we sit to participate in this webinar that is hosted under education and partnership and with our presenter, Dr. Michael Pinnock. So it's welcome. I hope you will enjoy it. I hope you'll benefit from it, and that the takeaways will be such that you'll want to participate some more in the different webinars and other tidbits that we will have for you as we move throughout the year. So I welcome you again and thank you for being here. Dr. Thorpe, over to you.
Thank you, Sir President, and fully endorse your team. We, of course, as your team, as council, will endeavor to support that general team to ensure that we are able to communicate effectively our message, and our engineering fraternity will actually be able to embrace what we're trying to do for this council year. Thank you again, Sir President. This time, I know that you guys are there and excited and want to hear from our main speaker, so we're not going to be delaying the process. At this time, we'd like to ask Ms. Hanson, another GIE student, from the GIE student chapter from the University of Technology, Jamaica, to introduce our guest speaker. Ms. Hanson.
Good evening, everyone. I am Brianna, and I will be introducing Dr. Michael A. Pinnock. Dr. Michael A. Pinnock is a human resource business partner for Lockheed Martin, where he provides strategic human resource and labor relations support for more than 250 employees on Long Island. He works on a classified program responsible for one of the country's most strategic nuclear deterrent programs for the military. He graduated from Stony Brook in 1999 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy, and then again in 2000 with a Master's of Professional Studies in Human Resource Management. Since graduation, he has worked in human resource for companies such as Whole Foods Market, the Home Depot, and Con Edison. Dr. Pinnock completed a Doctor of Education degree in Organizational Leadership at Northeastern University in 2020. His research is centered around African American men in corporate America. Michael is passionate about diversity and inclusion and works to create spaces of belonging for all employees daily, with a special focus on underrepresented employees. In 2019, he was selected as a Hillard and Sizemore Fellow. This fellowship is for career scholars and advanced graduate students chosen to work directly with established researchers on questions and methods that inform studies on African American in education. I present to you all Dr. Michael A. Pinnock.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you certainly to the Jamaica Institute of Engineers, as well as Dr. Thorpe for this invite. Thank you for inviting me. This is, a subject that I'm passionate about, and something that I've experienced over the years. So I'll kind of tell you first, start, in addition to that, kind of tell you how I get to be qualified to talk about this. So I've been at Lockheed Martin now for about 8 years. Actually, I need to update this slide, but Lockheed Martin is a defense contractor. So we build, essentially we build weapons for the United States and other countries' military. So we are currently the main manufacturer for the brand new F-35, if you've following that, tanks, submarines, and those kinds of things. So much of who I support in doing my human resources work now is for engineers. In addition to that, I worked at a company called Con Edison. Con Edison is the utility for New York City and Westchester. And so that consisted of the linemen that go out on the line and connect the power lines, I spent most of my time in the power plants. And so I have a background in that. And in addition to that, I did some work in the retail environment early in my career. And again, my degrees are from Stony Brook University and from Northeastern, as you kind of heard earlier. So I've spent, probably a lion's share of my career working with engineers, and across both companies and even across both cultures. Even though I'm here in the U.S., there tends to be a focus on the technical work, the things that you learn at school. But when you get into a work environment, and when you get ready, when you have to actually push a product out, or you have to you're manufacturing or any of that, there are certain things you're going to need to be able to work together. And that's where these soft skills come in. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about those soft skills in the way that I see them. I might even give you some examples of how I see it in. So hard skills versus soft skills. Hard skills are typically those you obtain through hands-on experience. So either your experience as an engineer or through education. So those of you that either have an engineering degree or pursue an engineering degree, that's training you on your hard skills. Soft skills, however, are more interpersonal skills than technical, and they typically involve personality traits. So I think that's an important part, because in terms of personality traits, certain types of people tend to become engineers. Although it's not it's not a hard and fast rule. When you look over on average, um, engineers, as they say, tend to be black and white. They're usually typically more introverted than an HR guy like me, who's typically an extrovert. And that really just means where you get power from. So as an extrovert, to relax, I could totally go hang out at a party and talk to people all night. And that for me is relaxing and restful. An introvert, however, wants to come home and slow down and not have all the noise and not do things that involve communicating with people, and that's where they get power. And neither is right or wrong. It's just that that's where you gain power from. And so understanding that is part of your soft skills. One way that I could kind of demonstrate that is I was working with an engineering manager here, also a West Indian. He's from St. Croix, and he's a very introverted guy, and I'm talkative. I like to talk, so I typically set up a half an hour time just to talk with all my leaders, to go over and to catch up, to see what's going on during the week, go over any issues that's happening, anything I can help them with. And he started to always miss those. Well, I found out when we were doing the leadership class and we were doing our MBTI, and we're taking a look at personality traits, that was extremely stressful for him. Having to sit down and talk to me for 30 minutes, while I enjoyed it and I enjoyed catching up and I enjoyed doing those things, that was extremely stressful for him because he was a lot more introverted than me. And so what works in terms of our communication is if I email him the stuff and then we talk if we need to. He's very good at kind of getting, taking his email, setting up his to-do list and knocking things out. And so it's those kinds of things that you're talking about, soft skills, learning to kind of identify them. So that's the difference between soft skills and hard skills. So if I were to take a look at hard skills first, things like, the MATLAB program, which is an engineering program, technical drawing, project management, proposal writing, troubleshooting, which engineers do, workflow development. Those are the kinds of things that you would typically learn at university or learn during your experience that we would classify as hard skills. Soft skills, on the other hand, involve things that are a lot more what you may consider as nebulous. Interpersonal skills, problem solving skills, communication skills, adaptability, critical thinking, time management, teamwork, or all things that I would consider soft skills. Now, I look at first at problem solving, and I look at problem solving as soft skills, while some might say to me that it's hard skills. So, looking for any feedback on the call. When you think about problem solving, do you think about it as a soft skill or as a hard skill? And I'm looking for you to give me some feedback here, if you can.
So Dr. Pinnock is asking if you guys believe that it's a soft or hard skill, and he will accept communication from you guys. So if anybody wants to respond, please feel free, raise your hand, and we'll accept.
Okay, well, I'll move on here. Some might think of problem solving as a hard skill, because if you have an engineering problem, typically you'd use your skills, whatever discipline it would be, whether electrical or civil or hardware or systems, you'd use those skills to problem solve. But many times when you're problem solving, particularly if you're working on something that includes all of the other disciplines, things like communication and critical thinking and putting different opinions together work. When you're in the workforce and you're trying to solve a problem, you typically have to reach out to SMEs or subject matter experts, or you typically need to speak to other people to solve one of those problems. So it's not the kind of problem where you can rely simply on the hard skills that we're talking about, but you also need to for problem solving, kind of weave in things like communication, adaptability, interpersonal skills, and things like that. So I would classify problem solving in the context of the workplace to be a soft skill, because often it uses a combination of both soft skills and hard skills, right? So when we talk about interpersonal skills, we're talking about things like decision-making skills, self-awareness, conflict resolution, and emotional intelligence. And here's why those things are important. Interpersonal skills are the way that you relate to people. So when you're thinking about a project, whether you're talking about it from a proposal standpoint, or you're going to or you're doing the actual work, the design and development or the implementation, it is necessary for you to work with other people in terms of doing that. So you need to manage your relationship. You need to problem solve, like I talked about intelligently. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the other side of what we know as IQ, right? EQ is kind of understanding who you are and what makes you react to certain things, and how you do that in relation to other people. And so emotional intelligence are things that are important, or relationship management. Looks like I have a question here, so let me just kind of pull that up.
I have a raised hand from Mr. McFarlane, and Mr. McFarlane.
Mhm.
Mr. McFarlane.
Yes, he was answering I was putting up my hand to answer the question, but he passed on, so that's fine. You can continue.
Okay, it was slower. All right, I'll be a little bit slower the next time. Thank you. So these skills are absolutely important to engineers, even, because if you don't have this to be able to work together as a team, then you might never, finish the project or get the product that you're designing. And so interpersonal skills for me is one of the ways that I've seen young engineers particularly struggle. Why is that? It goes back to what I was saying earlier. Typically, the typical types of people that tend to choose careers like engineering are very introspective, and often are introverts. And this kind of things are very stressful for them. Although they love to kind of get in there and figure out an engineering problem. The point is that you really have to balance both. Okay. So problem solving as a soft skill is, I talked about that earlier, that it's, to me it's a soft skill and not a hard skill. So I'm interested to kind of hear from anybody out there. Does anybody disagree with me? Does anybody disagree with
Depends on
my,
the problem.
pardon me?
Oh, the still not muted. All right. So
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
right. So my opinion on it, it's a bit of both. Some problems require the hard skills, some require the soft skills, and in most of the cases you need to use the soft skills when you're presenting the hard skill information. So just in the workplace dealing with persons, you tend to have to use both on a daily basis. That's what I wanted
Right.
to say.
Right. So and I agree with that, and I've seen often, met up with engineers that would rather just shut their door and deal with those difficult problems. But then you're not including other groups. When you're designing something complex like a submarine, electrical has to talk to mechanical. Mechanical and electrical, they have to talk to the systems department. Everybody needs to talk to the software department. And it's those types of collaborations that are important. It's almost impossible to kind of sit in your office and design an entire system by yourself without other disciplines, right? So that's one.
We have another response. I have Dr. Rose, William Rose.
Well, I was saying that as most things or projects nowadays are interdisciplinary, and therefore you have to effectively communicate in between disciplines. So it is a soft skill that utilizes hard skills. So again, it's a combination. But if you cannot bridge gaps, then you have problems, because as more projects, more things become more interdisciplinary, then the need for that particular skill becomes more and more needed.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think I have one more response. One more person want to respond. Is that Matthew? Matthew Green? You had a hand up.
Hello, yeah, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, in the working experience that I think believe it both, where we have need to understand what the problem is and then apply various techniques and skills, and it's a combination. So I'm agreeing with what others have said. It's pretty useful, make it be flexible, because when you're out in the field, flexibility is of its importance. And however you resolve the problem is resolved once you meet the end goal and everybody's happy. So you'll need various combinations, and there's no one way to resolve a problem.
Right. Okay, so I want to move on now to the idea of communication. Effective communication and everything we're talking about is key, but there's several different types of communication. There's verbal, there's nonverbal, written, email, social media, and I also put in there cultural. When you're dealing with multicultural, as we kind of globalize as a world, those cultural things are very important. And I thought of a story here that I'll share that I think people on this call will appreciate. I was born and raised in America, but I do have Jamaican parents, and so I was obviously raised in the Jamaican culture. And you'll understand why I give you that bit of information. But when I was working for Con Edison and working in the power plants, I walk in one morning and a supervisor is livid. And he's upset with not one of his engineers, but one of his mechanics. And let's, for the purposes of our conversation, call this mechanic John. And he says to me, John, he lost his temper and started throwing and banging things, and then he cursed at me in Jamaican. And so you can imagine the things that he wrote, that he was saying, but this guy cursed at him in Jamaican. And so as the HR person, I went down to the field and talked to both John, the supervisor, and understand what he was saying. And John didn't really want to talk to me. He was still livid, and in patois, as we talk, he was pretty much telling me, I don't want to talk to you right now, and I don't want to talk to the supervisor right now. So I went and I spoke with the supervisor and started to talk to him about what he was doing. So at the time, I was probably in my early 30s, and John had to be in, mid to early to mid 40s. And I started to talk to the supervisor about what it was. And the supervisor could not figure out why John was so angry. And then he said to me, and then he wasn't doing it right, so I pointed in his face. And I said, you pointed in his face? And he showed me. He put his hand right in his face like that. And I said, oh, now I understand why John was so upset. You don't point at somebody's faces, particularly in our culture. And so as he tried to rub it off, like he had no reason to get so upset, I had to kind of explain to the supervisor why John was so upset. John was Jamaican. He automatically went into patois. He started throwing things and getting upset because he felt disrespected. Those kinds of things happen all the time in corporate America, particularly when you're working with different cultures. I have another story where my brother had a manager who was from Spain, and in their culture, they clap. I need you to get this done soon. And that obviously annoyed my brother. So don't clap at me like I'm a dog. And the guy from Spain had no idea why my brother was so angry, but that clapping at him to do things made him angry. So when we're communicating, we have to, in our nonverbal communication, we need to be aware of any potential cultural differences that may offend anybody. In written and email, I learned earlier in my career that if somebody sends me an email that angers me, I should write the email, but don't send it. Let it sit there for a couple hours and read it again. Because what happens when you're doing written email, and we see it on social media, you can't necessarily communicate tone or intent. And so a lot of miscommunications happen. The words might be right, but you might be coming off differently. And so when you're dealing with that from an engineering standpoint, an engineer might be communicating very black and white. This is what it is. And you may be right, but the tone, the cultural considerations, and those things can totally make what you're saying be lost. And so if it's not understood, then you got an issue with communication, even though verbally or from the words you're saying, what you're saying might be correct. Okay. So that's communication. Adaptability. Adaptability is one of the soft skills that as engineers, I tend, and I usually see this as a problem in some of what we'll call my more seasoned engineers. The ability to adjust the emotions, thoughts, and behaviors to changing situations and conditions. Being open to change, new ideas, challenges, and approaches. So what I mean by see issues with adaptability or changing in our most seasoned engineers, a lot of us seasoned engineers will say, why do we need to change it? I've been doing it this way 20, 30, 40 years. I work with one of my engineers who has since retired, but he was working on this same program for the past 55 years. And he would not do any calculations on a computer. In fact, he would say that these kids don't have real engineering degrees because they need computers and they need calculators. And when he was an engineer, he learned to do everything by hand. And he would not change. He was great at what he did. He got the right answer every time from what his managers told me, but you couldn't get him to get on a computer. You couldn't get him to do any modeling, which as the company moved to model-based engineering, he had to do everything by hand. Now, one of the things that makes what makes you good at engineering is the ability to listen to different perspectives. All the different perspectives is what sometimes you're looking at something one way because you've done it that way so many times, but there could be somebody with a new and fresh idea, or somebody that's been in somewhere but has worked different places, and maybe they handle that problem different in other places. And so the ability to talk and adapt to those emotions are important. Do we have any more questions? I think I saw a hand raised. Do we? Did I miss anything? Okay, it seems not. So that is for adaptability. So critical thinking. And I have some points here, but what do you think I'm talking about when I talk about critical thinking as a soft skill?
Any response to Dr. Pinnock's question?
Good evening.
Good evening.
When it comes to critical thinking, you take the time to put yourself in a position where you ask yourself, what is the problem? How will it be solved? And you ask yourself what I will need to get it done. And you think in depth in regards to the issue or whatever the situation may be, or even how to even improve what you're doing and better yourselves. So when you think outside and, even get external, you talk to other persons to capture what they do and how they do it. And even if you apply all of it, you probably say, all right, you're on the right track. Or if there's one thing that they do that you don't do, you can just add it and implement it. So it is just having just in-depth thinking.
In-depth thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good definition. And I would also add the ability to identify your own bias. Because that's a big thing with critical thinking. When I was writing for my dissertation for my doctorate, we had a whole chapter where I had to sit down and write out what are my biases to the problem that I'm trying to solve. What kind of things might influence my thinking? Because that helps me to avoid that particular bias if I identify them myself. Often, this idea of being open to new ideas means that you have to kind of admit to yourself that you think the way you do because of your experiences, and that other experiences may be important to the problem that you're trying to solve. And that for instance is the crux of thinking outside of the box. All right, so critical thinking, in my estimation, involves a lot of things, and it involves kind of a part of it is self-study and trying to understand yourself and where you stand in relation to the problem that you're trying to address.
One more for you, Dr. Pinnock.
Sure.
Dr. Rose.
If you're speaking, we can't hear you.
On mute. Hello, are you hearing me now?
I can. Yes.
Yeah, it is critical thinking is an approach that allows you to get to the solution by basically any means thinking outside of the box, utilizing all the things that you have learned, because you have a lot of tools. All this year you've been studying engineering and stuff like that. It's how you put it together to get to a solution. And that is what people look for in a person that they say does good critical thinking, right? It requires you also to step outside the box a lot of times and look at a problem. You know, it also requires you to understand the system that you're working on and therefore can apply your knowledge to it.
Right. Very true. Very true. It's a very critical thinking, to kind of sum it up is an active process. It's a little bit more than pondering a question. It's actually going through your steps and trying to map out the issue as you see it. Sometimes when you address a problem this way, you might realize I need to call in a subject matter expert. I need to call in somebody that's good at modeling, or I need to call in a software engineer that can write the code to do what I'm thinking. But it's that idea, kind of looking at the problem in a different way and understanding who the stakeholders or subject matter experts are that you can call for help with your issue. Okay. So let's do one more. Time management as a soft skill. So time management is an interesting one from my standpoint, because just coming out of college, I struggled with this a bit. And it's interesting because if you don't manage your time, you could sit at your desk all day and be working and get absolutely nothing done. And so that's a soft skill of kind of understanding how to prioritize, understanding that it's important to plan your day. So one of the things that I make a practice of doing, and I'm great at it sometimes, and then it goes aside depending on how busy I am, but giving yourself 10 minutes in the morning to sit down and say, what do I have to get done today? And in addition to what do I have to get done, what are they where do they rank in terms of priority? So I typically rank my my to-do list and things that must get done today, things that can get done today, but I got some time to do, and things that are kind of long-term things that I need to start thinking about. They might be weeks out, and I need to have them, so I'll put them on my list. But on my priority list, there are things that if I've gotten all my to-dos done, I got my things done for the day, and I'm sitting, I can start to work on that deadline as a couple of weeks or a couple months out. That's the skill that is I think has been one of the most important things for me, going from the practitioner level and going into management and going into actually leading people, because now I need to sit down and I got to have a plan for the people that work for me. I've got to kind of understand what everybody's doing, where I fit in that context, and in addition, what challenges or what things the department has to do. So time management will become more and more important the further you get in your career. You're not going to be able to get through a day without planning it out first and kind of prioritizing. Does anybody on the call struggle with time management as a practice? Jamel, I see your hand raised.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about why you struggle with time management. What are the things that as a soft skill you think that you need to get better at?
For one, I think it's time management. I sometimes do overwork myself. I don't give myself enough time to do one thing and then I jump on to do another thing. So I think I just really need to, get time management potted.
Right. So one of those things are, and there's certain courses you can take. You can take them online or you can register for them. But it sounds like you have a something that you kind of need to know how to prioritize.
Right, right.
And what they tell you is, so you have to look at things. So engineers I've seen have two problems. Either they want to get everything done and get it off their desk. So as it comes in, they do it. Here, it's yours. You need that. Here, it's yours. The other thing I've seen engineers do is they automatically go to the things that they like doing. And so if you're automatically going to the things you like doing, the things you're not necessarily strong at or that you don't like doing, often you say, okay, I'll get to that. Right. But when you're looking at time management, I think that it's really important for you to sit down and decide for yourself early in the day, before you start reading your emails, before you start doing things for people, you look and say, what things have to get done today? What cannot wait till tomorrow? And then you tackle those and you prioritize those, and then you get to your emails, and then some things out of your emails. So I'll prioritize first, or kind of write down what I need to do, and then I'll skim my emails to kind of see what else are people asking for, what do I need to answer today. And there's some things that, yeah, they might be quick, but if I start answering all the quick things, it's time for lunch, and I haven't gotten to the things that I've decided that need to get done. So email could definitely be a time stealer, and it has been in my experience. Anyone else's time management as a skill that maybe you struggle with?
Yeah.
Who I'm not sure. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you struggle with in terms of time management?
All right, for me, good night again, everyone. All right, so for me, regarding to time management, one of my biggest issue is procrastination, and I
Mhm.
think because sometimes I let my personal work life and interfere with my overall work ethics that I should be focused on. I don't have a balance between my personal life and my work life.
Right.
And sometimes I tend to let procrastination be the biggest impact between both.
Right. That idea of work life balance it really became a thing during the pandemic, when when all of us were in our homes, and many people moved um to working from home. I know with me, I was always on because the computer was always there. So maybe I watch TV, I get bored, I go back to my computer. In HR, we were really running the COVID response, and so when somebody got COVID from HR, I had to put it into the computer. I had to do the contact tracing, and it kind of felt like my computer was on. And also another thing that I didn't have early in my career that I have now is this: I have work gives you a cell phone, and so you can always, when you're home, you could check on your emails. And what I found is this is a dangerous thing, because when you have issues at work, there's things that might get me angry or upset or maybe even sad, because I know things are going on, and that now it impacts me when I'm dealing with my son or my wife. I think that one of the things that you need to do is you really need to put a line between it. It part of time management also means that you should be planning your personal time. And so I got a calendar for myself, and I have a couple of organizations outside of work that I work for. I got different philanthropic things that I go to. Sometimes I have commitments at church, and that all of that needs to go on a calendar, and you should be prioritizing that. What's really important. Again, that gets harder and harder as you get older. When I started to do my doctoral degree, my son was about 11. And so once I came home from work, it was either football or Boy Scouts, or it was church that I had to take him to, and then I had commitments with my wife, And then at some point, I had to fit in all the reading and the writing that it does take a doctoral degree. I couldn't have gotten everything done without kind of writing it down and having a plan. And one affects the other. We're human beings, we're multifaceted. If things are not going so good at home, it affects your work performance. If your work performance is not really, if you're having issues with a boss or with a colleague, you bring that stuff out of work. As some of us are able to compartmentalize more than others. But being human beings, if you're upset, things might impact you. So that's another big thing about time management. Ensuring your work-life balance is saying to yourself what's important and where do I need to focus my energy. And I don't necessarily think about it as a scale as it used to be. I more think about it as a lever. There are some days where the lever is work. Work is going to get more of my attention. So, being in human resources, I negotiate a lot of labor contracts. And so if I'm negotiating with one of the unions, I'm gonna be at the hotel for a week. I'm gonna have interest-based bargaining, leading up to that week that we stay away at the hotel. And so my family has to realize that, that lever is going to be on work for a while. At the same time, work gets the same thing, because there are times I will say to my leader, I have such and such going on at home, and I'm gonna need to be home. I might do my work day, but I'm not staying late today. Today I had this going on, and I was on business travel, so my leader knew I'm speaking tonight. I'm gonna have to leave a little early to make that appointment, and it's a skill, because he knows that there are some nights I'm doing 12 and 13 and 14 hours. Some days I might do 8. It definitely does even out, but that's what I would say about that. Okay.
I think
Any
Engineer Boyd had a comment.
okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I wanted to just add a little bit to what you're saying, Dr. Pinnock. In terms of time management, I think a part that most engineers miss is also managing the time for those persons who you report to. It's very, very critical, because you may have great solutions, or you may have a report that you want to present, but your timing and not understanding the tempo or the feel of the organization at the time. You may want to, or you may be intruding at the wrong time, and the response that you get is wrong, right? So sometimes you've made a presentation, it's great, it's wonderful, but the timing is just so wrong. Whether be it because the organization is going through difficulties, or it is that just the person who you're speaking to at that point has tuned you out. So your management at the time. I've had some employees who it's after hours, and when I'm settling down to try to get through my stuff to close out my day, that's when they appear at the door, and then they want to distribute. Now they have had all day to present. When I was in another industry, the operations manager would come at 6:30. She would come at 6:30 p.m. and she would be delivering to me all the problems that she has had from the morning, that she could have had those discussions. So your time management skill is important for yourself, and also how you manage those that are around you.
Right. And that to add to that also means that you could use that method as a means to manage up. So I noticed when I got a new leader recently, and I noticed that it was taking him long for him to get back to me, which was impacting answers that I got back to either the bargaining unit or to leaders that had questions of me. So what I did to manage him was I said, do you mind if I set up a standing 30-minute meeting? When are you free? and he's free on Wednesdays at 4. So every Wednesday at 4, I have a standing meeting, no matter where I am, whether if I'm in the office, we'll do it in person. If not, we'll do it over Skype. And and what happens is I can save up all of my questions. And for that half hour, I got them in front of me. I have a dedicated audience, and I can get what I need done. And that helps me, even though he's my boss, that helps me get what I need from him so that I can service my customers. So that idea of time management, sometimes, as you said, it's important for you to manage up and to consider that, he's dealing with things that I'm not. So I got the union. I support 3 different collective bargaining agreements. He has probably 10 of me supporting as much. So while he's thinking about the big picture, I'm thinking about just these questions. So I need to manage him because I know he's busy. And so that's an important part about time management is certainly managing up. Okay. If I have no more questions, I'll go back to teamwork. The ability to work as a team is essential to business. This goes back to kind of the notion that, as engineers, often I know engineers that I'm thinking of one now. We used to call him the mad scientist because he never combed his hair. He was a bit untidy, his shirt always out, but he'd be in his office writing on the chalkboard. And he thought he was brilliant because he was a chemical engineer. And looking into boiler chemistry, he would be sitting, papers would be all over the place, and he would figure out whatever issue of the day it was, that it was. Issue with him was it was hard for him to work with other people. He was very, let's call him eccentric. Could be, at times, difficult to work with. At times had a short temper. And when he was a nice guy. At other times he had a short temper. And so
God is saying, God for saying it and say you and Abby can listen. You hear?
but the issue with him was that trying to get him on a team to solve a boiler chemistry problem was difficult. Right. And so, again, as you move into your career, if you're going to lead a team, which, that's where the money is at from my perspective. If you're going to start to lead and you're going to start to lead big projects, this cooperative or coordinated effort on the part of a group acting together as a team in the interest of a common cause, that's key to being able to work at some of these larger engineering companies. Is key to working on some of these multi-million-dollar projects is the ability to be able to work and to partner across teams. The other thing I think, in terms of teamwork, what I've seen a lot more post-pandemic is I've seen my particular company, since it's a global one, to be able to have teams in different time zones and all across the company where, I might need to be on the phone at 9 o'clock because it's only 5 o'clock, in the area I'm talking to. That teamwork is that much harder when it's in the virtual sense. But I've been seeing from an engineering perspective that more and more, particularly post-pandemic, is that you have those teams and they're geographically dispersed, whether it be in just a different state here in the U.S. or sometimes in different companies, in different countries. And so that's a soft skill that I've seen certain engineering types struggle with. So tell me, I'll put the question to the group, once more. Does anybody kind of struggle with that working as a team where maybe you love figuring out the technical problem, but when you're bringing other people in, it's annoying for you, or it kind of, you believe, slows you down?
So we
See it
have
right there now?
Udega. So Udega, hands up.
You're on mute if you're talking. Still on mute.
I think we can move to Jordan Young.
Okay,
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
okay,
Yes, go
okay,
ahead,
good.
Dr. Uding.
Sorry, I can now ask question now.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, thanks for the extended lecture on soft and hard skill. I've never been considering this. I always consider skills generally, but I've never been considering or comparing which one is hard and which one is soft. However, we are always designing robotics. When we design, the engineering students will design and we program. We're always having problem in coding because after coding, the robot will be able to work. And you mentioned MATLAB also. When we are using MATLAB for digital signal processing, we also need to write MATLAB code, which we call the machine mnemonics, for we to get actual results. Now, when we are writing these codes or coding robot, where are we classifying it? Are we saying we are doing soft skill or we are doing hard skill?
When you're writing the code?
When we are doing the coding, yeah.
I
Both
mean,
like in
I think it depends. I think if one person is doing it, you're using hard skills, certainly if you're writing in a certain language. But there are also times when you might need to collaborate. If there's a certain part of the code that you're not getting, it may be beneficial to reach out to a teammate or reach out to somebody in another area of their business that you know is a subject matter expert on that language to help you finish up the code. So it's a combination. It depends on what you're talking about.
So that means when I'm doing it by myself, we can say soft skill, but if I need
No, if you're doing it by yourself, I would say it's a hard skill because you have to know the language and you would have been trained on that language to write that piece of code at that particular time.
But if I'm getting assistance from somebody, then it becomes soft skill.
Then you have soft skills that you would need to employ in order to have the, use those relationships that you have to be able to get assistance with it.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Did you say we had another one? Somebody else? Jordan? Okay.
I was also agreeing with team members working on an issue as also as civil engineering students, because I also have this issue sometimes when I work in group members. So yeah, but we think working as a team is also the major effect and impact we should need, because it give us a better brainstorm of ideas, can help to solve efficiently for the problems, so the problems are solved quicker. So yeah, I completely honest, but yeah, it's still a problem for me.
Yeah, and it's about communication, and nobody is more important than the other. I'm reminded of a time when I worked in the power plants, and it was interesting. The technicians and the engineers always went at it, and the engineers would always complain that the technicians would complain that the engineers, they would say the engineers are idiots. I don't know where they got their degree from. They don't know what they're doing. And it was simple issues about where they designed and put a valve. One of the technicians brought me out to the steam pipe and said, how am I going to turn this valve? Because the engineer drove it and the valve was facing the wall, and there was maybe about 12 inches between the valve and the wall. And so the mechanic couldn't get in to turn the valve or do what he want, and they would fight consistently. The engineers would say, I don't need to talk to you. I got an engineering degree. I don't have to ask you anything. And so that highlights the importance. Those guys in the power plant, the operator mechanics, they're out there turning those valves, they're operating the plant. They are experts in that regard. And an engineer would do right to ask and say, hey, they're asking me to put a pipe here. You're worried about pitching the pipe. You're worried about the right turn so you don't cause water hammer. But you never asked the guy who's going to turn the valve, where would the valve work best, right? And so from that standpoint, that's where you see teamwork and simple communication. Simple asking would have you come out with a better product, right? So, so that's a little bit
Yeah,
about what
completely understood.
pardon me. Okay. So yeah, so that's where something like teamwork as a soft skill is I think it's important, and often in the engineering ranks or in the areas that you work, people like technicians can sometimes be overlooked, but they're just as important to the process as engineers, and that's where that realization that everybody is important to the project. It doesn't matter what their degree is, it doesn't matter what they're qualified to do. If everybody's doing their piece right, then you come out with a better product, right?
One more for you, Doctor.
Sure.
So Rose, William Rose.
Yeah, I've been trying to talk from before, and I don't know what happened. The soft skills. But one of the things, I want to go back to something else. But before I do that, I was saying that you have to respect other people all the time. One of the benefits I got coming up was that I was actually a technician before I became an engineer, which helped enormously, right? Because you appreciate the technician as much as you appreciate the engineer. Now, I was trying to get to the thing about time management. Right. Here's the issue, is that sometimes you're trying to manage your time, but in managing your time, you have people report to you who also you're depending upon them, right? And if they don't make their time, then automatically it puts off your time. So that is an issue. The other thing,
and that's a different skill.
Yes.
That's time management, but there's also a leadership role there that I'll talk about, but go ahead.
The other part is that as engineers, we tend to be, have the I must get it done attitude, right? It start a problem, and sometimes that will keep you on a problem because you need to solve it. It can't beat you, right? OCD almost, right? So that does interfere with your total time management, right?
Absolutely. And I talked about that where, sometimes, people tend to spend, and even I do it. It might not be an engineering problem, but I spend the time, things that are enjoyable, it's easy to spend more time on those. And if you're spending too much time on those and you're saying, I get to the things I don't enjoy as much, and then you end up not getting it done.
It's a challenge sometimes. It's the fact that you need, you think you should be able to do this. And therefore, sometimes it bogs you down. The other thing that the gentleman spoke about was, you're bringing things to somebody at a different time. It's two sides to that equation, because the top management must also understand that this person who is bringing this thing at 6 o'clock has probably labored intensely during the time in order to try to make a time to get it to them. So maybe it is better to say, let us deal with this tomorrow instead of tuning the person out, because then the person, you have two things. You don't get effectively what the person is saying, and then the person you run the risk of having somebody feeling not appreciated, which is not good for the entire workplace or the work environment. Right. We have to be careful. It's two sides of the equation.
Yeah, there is, and I'll kind of where I talk about that from a time management skill. I talked about managing up, so that if I've noticed them, I need to notice that, if I can't get in touch with my leader, it's not because he's sitting in his office doing nothing. He's doing things, and so from that perspective, I need to get things done. But also, when I can't get in touch with somebody, you know what I'll do? I'll go in their Outlook and I'll schedule a time. I'll talk to you at 3 o'clock tomorrow. You're open on your calendar. And often, when especially, when you have a lot of things coming at you, again, setting that time apart, and you could do that either as a leader or an employee.
Yeah.
Making sure that you are proactive in scheduling time so that you can do it. And I learned this from one of my leaders that, when I was supporting a different program. She said, you keep on IMing me. I tell you I'm not available, and you still haven't gone on my calendar and scheduled the time to talk to me. She's not thinking about me. She was thinking about 100 other things. And so I think that's where, if you're young in engineering or you're young in business, you got to realize that often it ain't about you. It's not something that you need to take personal. It's not, it really has nothing to do with you. It has to do with competing priorities. And sometimes everything is priority. And when you work for a corporation, you might have 3 bosses and you got to get everything done because all 3 of them want it and they're all 3 important. It's just the way that business works nowadays. And so that idea of time management, it's very important that you manage up. Okay. So I want to thank you for allowing me to kind of give these skills, give this talk on soft skills. Some of the final thoughts that I thought about as I was completing this: soft skills are equally important as hard skills. What you learn in school, or what you learn to get whatever license you have, or or your work experience is extremely important. But how you put it together, how you get people to work together is important. These soft skills are important because relationships are essential to business. You have to think of everything as a relationship, whether it's with the technician that I spoke about, whether it's with your manager that can't see you at 6:30. Everything is about a relationship. So if you think about it, it's somebody told me years ago to think about every relationship as a cost benefit analysis. What does it cost me? And what am I getting in return? And does it match? And so when you look at it that way, those relationships is kind of what helps you with get things done, as we talk about. And although we talk about it in the context of leadership roles, and managing people, individual contributors, or those engineers that like working and solving problems, they need to have a grasp of this too, because often you need to ask for help. Often you might have to ask for somebody to help you with coding that has more experience than you. Or if you're a systems engineer and you're trying to put a whole system together, you got to work with electrical and mechanical and software and everybody to kind of get the whole system working. You don't manage anybody per se. You're not anybody's boss, but you need to kind of use your soft skills to manage these relationships. And often, this happens to me a lot in HR, even if I don't have direct reports. Often I end up managing anyway. I end up, leading anyway, because I have to do that to get what I need to get done. And so this idea of soft skills are things that you want to develop. Mentoring is a good way to do that. Finding yourself someone with a little bit more experience than you in the industry, and talking about how you do that. Even if it's not an engineer, somebody with my expertise in human resources or human capital management, that studies this and is able to kind of give you some tips to move forward, is a good way for you to develop these skills. And also, at least here in the States, colleges and universities are getting better at teaching these concepts and having them as part of the curriculum, because they're realizing that these things are essential to students getting jobs in the workforce. So again, thank you immensely for having me this evening. I totally enjoyed our talk, and I'll take any other questions that anybody has now.
I think
All
there's
right, so
just
time for the questions.
I think there's just a comment in the Q&A chat. I think this stemmed from the time management. The host was saying you could try to delegate tasks in order to manage your time as well.
Delegation works, but I think somebody also mentioned when you're delegating it and people are not doing it. Sometimes I struggle with that too. It works really well if you can delegate and people are getting it done, but the skill of delegating certainly means that you you know who you're delegating it to. You're familiar with their skills. You're familiar with what they can and can't do. And it might be that you delegate it, but you need to set the priority. If you delegate it, you need to say, I need it by X date.
Right.
Right? You get 2 weeks to do it so that you can make sure that your deliverables are also taken care of.
Right. And I suppose also ask them if they are able to do it in those 2 weeks as well.
Yeah, understanding what their commitments are would certainly be key to that. Yes.
Yeah, I
To
think-
Godfrey on
yeah.
hand is up. You have a comment or a question, Godfrey? Go ahead.
Yes, two comments. So first, for the engineering students on this webinar, I just wanted to let you know that what we have found in industries is that engineers, trained engineers, make the best managers. And even more so if you have good soft skills, it helps you. So if you have the attitude and the aptitude and you are trained, not just in the what we consider to be hard, but the soft skills, you can reach very far in the organizations. And even when you do your own, then you can. It is important, I wanted to comment on the matter of teamwork, because your team may be made up of many different persons. I think as Dr. Pinnock was raising, you may have engineers, you may have technicians, you may have what we consider in Jamaica to be artisans. There might be accountants, HR professionals, and others that are there that not necessarily have the academic certification that you have as an engineer. And therefore, it's important for you to communicate well. It's important for you to also communicate in the manner and the tone in which they understand. And it's important for you to also to read body language. It is most important. In one of my other career paths, I learned something very, very important. And I just share this with you. I realized that in one organization, the most unproductive time there was between the hours of 1:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. And for years it bothered me. I couldn't understand why. But I started to dissect it and I realized that the segment of the workforce for which I was having the problem were ladies, and in particular, the mothers. Why? Because during that time, their kids would be traveling by bus or on the roads to go home. So their concentration was not necessarily on the work, but more on, is my child safe? Is my child reaching home okay? And therefore, as an employer or as a supervisor, you need to understand that, because you might be pressuring them or thinking that they are loafing or wasting time. But the truth be told, if it is that the task you're giving them requires the concentration, requires their concentration, especially if it's a complex task, maybe it is that that task could be postponed to another time, or maybe you assign it to someone else who does not have those cares. So as a member of a team, it's important for you to understand the soft skills, especially reading the body languages, and to be able to understand what is it that your team member is communicating, so you can successfully complete the project. Thanks.
Thanks, Godfrey. Any other question? The floor is open. Question, comments? Go ahead, Dr. Rose.
Mute, yeah. everybody get up and leave work to drop their kids about that time. And there's a massive traffic jam in the entire city of Kingston early in the morning and between 1 and 3. And that is a loss of productivity. So I don't know if companies can find a way to help, you know, or if the pressures can be brought to the government to provide some kind of of transportation for children during those hours, because we lose a lot of productive time during those hours. Just a comment.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that my company has is something called flex time. So, you know, I was quite concerned, you know, with interviewing for this job initially. I was saying, you know, I have a young son, and you know, I have commitments. You know, one of the reasons I was looking at this job is because it was closer to where I live. My previous job was in Manhattan, and I could travel, you know, 1 to 2 hours to get into Manhattan because that's where everybody goes to work. This job was close, and what she said is they have a concept called flex time, where as long as I'm making my commitments, if I don't have anything scheduled for that time and I go away, I could go away for 2 or 3 hours as long as I make it back up and work the hours that I need to work. And a lot of companies, particularly post-pandemic, a lot of the technology companies here in the States are coming up with creative ways for people to be able to manage home. I think that's one of the things that came out of the pandemic is by being home. I know it certainly was the case for me. I realized that I was so busy that I really wasn't home. There was a lot at home that I was missing. And from that perspective, um, you know, there was an opportunity for me to, you know, spend some more time at home. And now I utilize that flex time more than I used to. I could go away, and if I need to go, go on. My son wrestles and plays football, and I've left to watch a match or a game, and then come back and finish up work if possible. And that helps. So that's, you know, an idea of how a company could potentially address the issue that you just spoke about.
Thanks for that response. Any other question? I see any hand raised? So I have a comment, and this again is aimed at the young engineers or even the student engineers. Oftentimes, Dr. Pinnock, what I realize, again, being in industry, part of an employment interview team, I realize that a lot of these youngsters they come to the interviews and they're of the view that, oh, I have this degree, I have a first class honors, or you know, this my qualification, company, you should see it as the thing that precedes me. And therefore they go to the interview and with that attitude do not necessarily come across to the company and the interview team very well. What are some of the things that you think you could as especially as a HR person could suggest for these youngsters who are getting ready to leave college, university, to venture into the working world?
Right. So that's an interesting question. It took me about 6 months after finishing my master's to get my first job, and I did my master's and my bachelor's back to back. And you know, I think one thing that a lot of times that students forget to do is you have to prepare for an interview. That's the first thing. So in preparing for interview, researching the company, researching who's gonna interview you. Today, it's a lot easier than it was. You have tools like LinkedIn, and you have websites that'll tell you about the company, but go in there prepared. I think also if you're going for a position that requires a degree, then assume that everybody has the same degree that you do, because they're calling you to interview because your resume struck there. You have what it takes to get the job. And somebody taught me this, early in my career. If they call you for an interview, you have what it takes to do the job. The interview is you telling them why you're the best candidate for the job. And so when you go into an interview, my assumption is that everybody has the 20 plus years of experience. Everybody has the degree work. Everybody has all of that stuff. So now it's my opportunity to tell you why the skills that I have will suit your organization best. It's definitely a place where you want to be humble. And I've taken to really planning out everything from the color of my suit to the color of my tie, to understanding who are the players that I'm going to be meeting with and what are the issues that are important to them. If you kind of understand those things and approach it from that way and realize that your degree really means nothing in the big scheme of things. Everybody going for that job has that degree.
Thank you, Dr. Pinnock. I now tell my students, it gives you the opportunity to knock a little hard on the door. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to let you in. You have to go to the interview room. You gotta tell the company what it is that you can bring to the table in order to help a company achieve the goal that they're desired.
Yeah, and
so
it's often it's you're building a relationship in that half hour or that hour that you're spending with the interviewer. That in that opportunity, you're building a relationship. You're they want to know if they can work with you, right? That's another thing an interview does. Am I even gonna like this person? Right?
Absolutely. Any other questions, comments? I see a raised hand. See who is up.
I think that's Engineer Boyd.
Go ahead, Engineer Boyd.
I'm sorry, I'm taking about so much time, but the comments that was made a while ago about the preparation for employment is so important. I've sat on engineering panels and I've sat in interviews for, I think, a wide cross section of employment opportunities. And the soft skills that you spoke about, Dr. Pinnock, is so important. Oftentimes, a candidate loses the panel within the first 5 to 10 minutes of entering the room and starting their presentation because they're unprepared and they are not projecting confidence. And the panel picks that up quite quickly. So my encouragement to young engineers and those aspiring to get jobs is go prepared. Know the company, as Dr. Pinnock is saying. Know their products. Know what they're about. And always understand that it's an opportunity. The door has been opened for you. So it's now for your time to shine. But no one is going to employ you if you're looking all over the room or you're looking down on the floor, you're not audible, and your responses are very sparse or they're not coherent. So it's important to prepare, practice, 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 and get yourself ready for it. And then go and be successful.
Thank you, Engineer Boyd. Very, very important point, combined with what Dr. Pinnock mentioned. It's really you telling the people that, hey, I have this degree. I'm prepared and ready to work and give my very best to this organization to ensure that as a team member, I can help the organization to achieve the objective that the organization has set out. Any other questions, comments?
There's a raised hand from William Rose.
Sorry to take up so much time, but one of the things when I just started working and I was asking the question, what should I do? What should I for the interview? And the lady at Services Commission said to me, you're selling yourself on the job market. She said, go with everything. And I've always carried that in my head. What I also try to tell students, even during an exam, don't start answering things before you fully understand the question. If you need to ask what exactly the person is asking, find out that before you start going off, right? Because that is important, right? And because a lot of people do that, and that doesn't come across well, right? When you start to answer and answer what people ask you. Don't be all over the place, you know? And if you're presenting, do not put anything up in a presentation that you cannot explain. You know, those are just subtle, small things, but very important. Because if one person asks you the question you don't know, it's an avalanche. You know, so those are the tips.
Thanks, Dr. Rose. Dr. Pinnock, something that strikes me. I find that with technology, young persons, young engineers, especially doing and creating presentation, sometimes they utilize technologies without focusing on professionalism. And in going into a professional setting, to include, and I heard you mention it, dress code, you know, all the professional requirements. That should be focused on by the person coming out into an interview, or you're in the company and basically want to maintain. You know, how would you address youngsters in particular who basically move from the university/college environment into the working world and be void of, are not as comfortable with approaching a professional environment in a professional manner?
Well, I think practice makes perfect, but you know, one of the particular things I've seen in both my research for you know, here in the States and through experience, is that often it is extremely important that you get a mentor early in your career that can guide you in these things. For me, I'm first generation college, and here in the States, my parents are immigrants from Jamaica, didn't really understand college here, didn't go to college themselves in Jamaica either, and didn't really get the system. All they knew is that I needed to go to college. And then so when I came out to go into the workforce, I was also going into places that they'd never been, in a country that they weren't necessarily familiar with. And so one of the key things that I wish I had done earlier in my career was connect with somebody that was able to guide me. There are numerous studies, particularly like Peter Capelli out of NYU, that talk about what they call a skills mismatch. That often universities here in this country, they're not exactly preparing you to work. You're getting the engineering skills, but how that applies to the actual practical workplace is not often taught, and it's also not necessarily intuitive. And so this idea of a mentor relationship is important. That's why organizations like JIE, Jamaica Institution of Engineers, are important. The American counterpart would be NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers. NSBE also is very similar, has their chapters. You know, getting into organizations like this, talking to people and having them help guide you is important because there's certain things I just didn't know, and I wouldn't necessarily know unless someone told me. So getting yourself a community to have these types of discussions, I think, are essential.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you, Dr. Pinnock. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. Questions, comments, suggestion.
There's a question in the Q&A section. What would be some of the best qualities of a mentor?
Well, so when I think about a mentor, I think about somebody who's doing what I hope to be doing one day. Somebody who's already traveled the road that I'm attempting to travel. Because if you're holding a position that I hope to hold one day, then you would be best to tell me how you navigated life and how you got there. So I think that's important. I think a mentor is also someone that has the time. Some often you say, I want you to be my mentor, and that person doesn't have the time or doesn't have the bandwidth or doesn't know how to mentor is important. And I think the last point on that is you've got to also understand what it is that you want out of a mentor. Often, my experience is that when you ask somebody to be your mentor, they don't necessarily have the time, and they're not going to do the prep work for you. They're not, you call and say, I have a mentoring session at X. Okay, the mentor's going to get on the phone and say, okay, what do you want to know? And so if you're not prepared and you're not able to guide those discussions yourself, you're doing yourself a disservice, because your mentor, if they're a professional, working professional, they're not necessarily going to be doing the prep work for you. And so my advice would be, when you're looking for mentors, those two things. One, they're where you want to be. Two, they have the time. And three, that you yourself have a game plan for what you want out of the mentor relationship.
And so that we have another question in the chat. It says, was there ever a point in your career where you thought you did not need a mentor?
I don't think I thought I did not need a mentor. I would verbalize it as I didn't know I needed a mentor. And there's a distinct difference of that. Again, coming out of the background I came where I didn't know what I didn't know. I got this nice, I came out, I entered the workforce. I already had my master's degree. So I figure, hey, I got my master's degree. That's more than most people. Often the people that I was interviewing with, people that would be managing me, only had a bachelor's degree. And I thought that stood for something. And figured that piece of paper was all it was. So it was years, probably 6 or 7 years in where when I realized I wasn't getting the results that I wanted to get out of my career. And then I had to ask myself why. And I have different mentors of different types. Some are definitely HR people that are doing HR. Also educators I speak to a lot. Because of my circuit, doing speaking engagements and also teaching like this, there's an educational piece to what I do. So I have people in that circuit, and I have different types of people that I need. But there was a time in my life where I didn't understand the role that mentorship plays in professional development.
Okay, keep questions coming. I have a couple more minutes. I have one more for you. Say good night to you. I arrived late. My apologies for asking this if it was already asked. And the question is, what are the main things to put on your resume after school?
So that's a loaded question. I mean, I I think one, the fact that you attained a degree, you want to have your degree on there, but there are certain things that, in my opinion, you should be doing during your time in college that would fill up your resume. I mean, certainly participating in an organization like this I put on my resume that I was, you know, the student secretary or the student vice president for whatever chapter of the JIE. I wouldn't necessarily put, if I had a job that wasn't related to me, I wouldn't have it. But any projects that you've completed, anything you've done from the distance from that show the skills that an employer is looking for. Certainly, if you've held any offices in your student organizations and those kinds of things, you know, you should have those types of things on your resume as well. In addition to the resume, and I'm not really sure how it works in Jamaica, but here in the United States, LinkedIn is huge. I got my current position through LinkedIn. I've gotten a bunch of interviews and people contacted me over LinkedIn in order to engage me for some amazing opportunities, whether they be speaking engagements or it's an opportunity to interview. They connect with us directly. Recruiters, actually, there's a recruiting piece that you can buy on LinkedIn and recruiters. And what's great about it from on the HR side is you can type in what you want. I want somebody that lives here, that has this kind of skills, and it'll pop up names. And one of the big things why I took my job is, you know, I was traveling to Manhattan between 1 and 2 hours a day, depending on traffic, depending on weather, because, you know, we have snow and that kind of stuff here in the Northeast. They were able to find me and realize that I live 20 minutes away from where they wanted me to work. And that was a big thing for them. So, you know, having a LinkedIn profile here in the States does result in a lot of interviews. You know, making sure, and that again, it's a marketing tool. So making sure that you have a professional picture, making sure that your skills are outlined. If you want to take a look at my LinkedIn profile, you can look up Michael Pinnock, EDD, and connect with me on LinkedIn. But that's a huge resource in addition to your resume.
All right. Yes. Thank you, Doc. Another question is there, as a new engineer, well, I know you're not an engineer, but the question is, as a new engineer in the workforce, what was the transition like? Did you feel out of place?
So I'm not an engineer as Dr. Thorpe does, but I on board many engineers. I've been, you know, supporting engineers, as I said, since 2006. And there are some. I mean, I think in the academic circles, it's known as imposter syndrome, where you almost don't feel like you deserve to be here. You have the degree work, you have everything it takes to be there, and you get the job and you feel out of place or you feel uncomfortable. Yeah, that phenomenon is called imposter syndrome, and I have witnessed it in many of my young engineers, often the very talented ones. Sometimes get that. Um, and my advice would be, if you got the job, that's because you can do the job. And these are the kinds of things that a mentor would help in terms of solidifying your confidence, and helping you with any things that you may need in order to succeed.
Thank you for that. We have them coming. I'm gonna do the last one before the it says, could you write your LinkedIn profile out so that we could see as a guide of what it should be like, so what it should be. So pretty much they probably want to have a look at how your LinkedIn profile is laid out, so that they probably can use yours as a form of guide in designing, developing their LinkedIn account.
Okay.
And while you think about that, here's one not necessarily for Dr. Pinnock, but I guess it's it's more for me. So it's directed to Engineer Boyd though. Prezi, the question is, can the JIE parent chapter, in collaboration with the student chapter, establish a mentorship program for engineering students?
I think that is most appropriate question to ask. And I don't think that's outside our wheelhouse. And it's something that certainly we will look at. Because it's important. And I just want to say that's one of the reasons why you're on this webinar. Because whilst it may not be the direct hand-holding mentorship, but it is providing information and education as to how we behave, how we should act in accordance to the industries that we're in. So it is something that we have considered, and I know we will pursue even more because it is important. And it actually ties in, if you notice, Dr. Pinnock and Dr. Thorpe, my hand was up because I wanted to make a very important point that the mentorship is most important and the selection of the mentor. Because what I've found is that a lot of young grads, they get into an organization and they pick up very bad habits from existing persons who are there, who may be disgruntled or have other issues. So the mentorship is most important because within the first 6 months of your working life in a company, that is where it either makes or break you, and the company decides whether or not it's worthwhile investing in your future, or it is that they should not continue with the employment, but take you off the probation and terminate the contract if you're on contract. So it is a very important point, and the comment that is being raised, and it's something that the JIA will pursue. Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank
So
you,
I
President.
I pulled up my LinkedIn profile here. So this is kind of what it looks like. My name, and then you have to think of a catchy headline, so it'll be different for everybody. These are kind of all the roles I filled in: HR manager, HR business partner, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging scholar, advocate, educator, speaker. DEIB is something that's huge in the States now with kind of all the different cultures and things that work. But along with that, you should, in the about, you have a little blurb about yourself. So if you see, just go ahead and connect with me and you can read it. But I have 3 or 4 things in it, and I kind of made it very casual. It's social media, so it's a kind of talk of kind of about me, you getting to know me. But then I go through my skills and the different things that I do, listing out my key accomplishments in each of my roles, so that and this is basically a resume online that so it here it kind of shows you my skill set. So I talked about Lockheed, where I work, and before that was Con Edison. This is where I worked at the utility. And then as the farther away they get, the shorter they are, because I want to give you an idea of what I did. But these become less important because they were so long ago. But it gives you an idea of kind of how long I've been at this HR thing. Down even a couple of sentences of what I did in my internship following grad school. You have here my last degree, my dissertation title, which if you look it up, you can read it and kind of understand that. Also my other degrees. What's important, a lot of people don't realize, but the actual things that you did as an undergrad. So I did pleasure fraternity while I was in undergrad. Was part of the National Honor Society. New York Public Interest Research Group was an organization that it was almost like it's a political or political lobbying for different things. At that time, I fancy myself to be a prospective lawyer. And so New York Public Interest Group, I ran the small claims court thing where people would call in for advice in the small claims court, and I could answer the basic questions, and I had a hotline to a lawyer that I could ask. So I was also a member of the Caribbean Students Organization. So here in the States, those things are big. You manage pretty big budgets. Caribbean Students Organization hosted Beanie Man, and his band came up, and we hosted him and did that. We also had a couple of sound clashes on campus that the Caribbean Students Organization hosted. But all of these things provide you insight to who I am, not just as a professional, but as a person. So as a volunteer, career counselor, Convoy of Hope was with my church. And so Convoy of Hope, we have something called Hope Day, where we give out free haircuts, we give out food. There's a concert that you do, and what I did for that one as a career counselor, we had a career table where I sat and I read resumes and helped people rewrite resumes and get jobs, and they connected to me on LinkedIn also once they did get their job for the work I did. And then LinkedIn also has a feature where people can endorse you and write you recommendations. So I've done fairly well. And you could see just today, Ms. Franco, she gave me a call. I think you're open to relocating. I'm a recruiter. I'm working with the company right outside of Syracuse, which is about 4 hours from here. And she's looking to see if I want to. I would like to interview for that company. So, LinkedIn is an extremely powerful tool. That and as you can see, I mean, I get calls or emails, a couple a week, with people interested in very impressive profile. Let's connect. People interested in talking to me, given my skills. So that's what my profile looks like. Please go on and connect with me. And you'll see it. Sometimes I have posts, regarding my stuff. So let's go.
I have another quick one for you. This one is interested. It says
Uh-huh.
on LinkedIn, have you ever experienced scam or phishing?
I have not. People do. I haven't had fake profiles contact me. I just don't. If I don't know you, or it doesn't look real, if you're not a recruiter or something, I won't accept it. Because of who I work for, I got to report any of those such things. So I usually, if it looks fishy, I send it to the security department, and I don't do it. In general, if you're gonna interview me, I don't have any money. I'm interviewing to get a job to pay me money. So you should be paying out or things like that. I think that would be one of the things that you look for. But there are scams on LinkedIn, and you protect yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, that's no more. Is there any raised hand? I think that questions. All right.
Okay. Well,
There are
thank
no
you
more
so much for
questions.
having me.
We want to invite the president of the GIE UE student chapter at this time, Mani, to give a vote of thanks. You hear Mani?
Hi, good night, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Good night.
Okay, so yes, good night, everyone. As was previously said, my name is Emmanuel Acosta from the UE Mona student chapter of JIE, and I've been charged with the honor of giving the vote of thanks. So I'd like to thank our moderator, Dr. Balvin Thorpe, as well as engineer Jeffrey Boyd and the entire JIE body for putting together this entire discussion for us tonight. The organization, promptness, and overall value has not been overlooked, and I can speak for everyone when I say that we are extremely grateful. I'd especially like to thank you, Dr. Michael Pinnock, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your knowledge and expertise with us tonight. We are all given the education and foundation of engineering in our degrees, but the soft skills you've exposed us to tonight are things not commonly shared in class. You have set us on the path of being well-rounded and reliable individuals in and out of the working world. That information has no price tag, and we appreciate the contribution you've made. You have taught us the skills such as teamwork, time management, adaptability, and overall leadership that are essential skills needed to navigate the world outside the classroom and are just as, if not more, valuable than the engineering information we get with the degree. I'd also like to thank everyone for making this investment in yourself and showing up tonight. In just 2 hours, you've already improved your markability significantly, and I hope you absorbed as much advice and wisdom as possible from all these distinguished professionals and take this information to become the best you can be. So thank you all and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nani. And I want to thank personally my friend, Dr. Pinnock, and everyone who made it here this evening. The JIE, as you heard from our president, will be engaging in more or similar type of webinar as we try to, put forward our task mandate as was outlined by the president earlier. And we're trying to build Jamaica, and we're trying to build engineering in a professional way. And we're going to continue doing that. That is, as much as we want the engineers to be out there practicing, we want it to be doing it safely, respectfully, and cognizant of rules and regulations. And the JIE will continue to offer encouragement, education as it relates to engineering practice. So once again, thanks everyone for coming in. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks for your patience, and have a wonderful rest of the evening. God's will.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.